Welcome to Viseland. I am Jason Visenberg.
And I'm Michael Visenberg.
Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We had a big weekend with the All-Star Weekend. Any thoughts, takeaways off the jump here?
I am now indebted to Jason Visenberg until the next All-Star game. As Anthony Simons was indeed the winner of the 2021 NBA dunk contest. However, Jason, I think you will agree with me that Cassius Stanley's first dunk got completely unnecessarily shit on by the judges.
Oh, no, definitely. I feel like the judging was a little weird anyway, because I thought Simon's like his dunk where he had the higher rim that he pulled the ball off of too.
Oh yeah, I think they just didn't get that.
Yeah, that's
to me that was original. That was impressive. I guess the way they thought it was like, oh, he's just doing like a normal dunk, but I've never seen anybody do something like that before. I thought to bring an actual original dunk to the dunk contest, he did the tribute, and then I don't know if anybody has ever, I have heard of players kissing the rim and everything like that. I count it as a kiss.
Yeah.
It was a COVID kiss. It was I'm leaning in there, but you're not too interested kind of kiss. But it was a kiss.
They should call it the COVID kiss dunk. I think that's a good name for
exactly. He was afraid that people in the All-Star game were going to be kissing that same rim. Didn't want to necessarily get his germs on it.
No, that's very respectful, and that's what we expect. No, and I thought Obi had that kind of between the with the same hand thing going on, his first. I think it was his first dunk.
That was fine.
I thought it was pretty. It was cool. It wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen, but
Obi was a good dunk contest guy. I thought all of his dunks were cool.
No, yeah, totally. But he pushed off
of dad.
He pushed off Julius.
The Prince Harry dunking on his dad.
Yeah,
I saw somebody tweet that out.
It all happened around the same time, so good on them. Probably Obi was probably very tuned into that at that time. Maybe that was what he's watching, before while warming up, getting a little preview. But and then the game itself.
Yeah, I'm sure that was.
Yeah, the game itself was okay.
They were chilling.
Yeah, obviously the Bronze team won all 4 quarters, but I think to me, I guess the one takeaway that I have that leaves at least a good taste in my mouth is just Dame hitting the game winner, just being super stone cold.
Yeah,
and then Giannis.
Beautiful pull-up.
Giannis, keeping the bank open, and
yeah, the fact that he made all of his 3-pointers to go perfect from the field. I know some people were kind of quibbling about who deserved All-Star MVP with Dame hitting the game winner and everything like that. It was Giannis's All-Star game this year, going 16 of 16, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to see Dame and Steph just trying to outdo each other. And
Steph hit that big that the halftime, going into halftime, Steph hit again, he barely stepped over half court, just hucked it up.
Amazing. Yeah, it was, and Stephen, of course, winning the 3-point shootout, something he hadn't done since I believe 2015. And yeah, it was interesting. It was a statement, I think, from the players that they didn't really want to play it. So the Elam ending last year kind of at least was sort of interesting. This year it was just let's just end this thing.
Well, yeah, it was a 2, the other team needed to outscore 2-1. That was just not going to happen.
I mean, it could have if they were trying.
If they were, yeah, but
they weren't trying. Neither team was trying very hard.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a point where it really got into a lot of half court sets.
Yeah,
where there's actual intensity on the defensive end, but again, it's at least it was an All-Star game, but not definitely not one we're going to be talking about for decades to come.
That's one we'd like to forget, honestly.
Yeah, but it was and the one thing I will say though that I like for future reference is put it all on Sunday. Put it all on Sunday. Just put it in one night. Start the game a little earlier, put in the skills, the 3-point, and then put that dunk contest at halftime, and save us a little bit of time. I thought it was kind of at least decent.
Indeed.
And then I know for you, this we got the G League playoffs going on, and Ignite got bumped.
They did. Yeah, they lost in the first round to Raptors 905. Not too surprising. The Raptors 905 had stolen. Excuse me?
Kuminga didn't play, or did he not play in the other playoff game?
No, he hadn't played in the last 3 games.
Yeah.
And the first game I thought they lost rather handily. Then they had to beat the Austin Spurs to get into the playoffs, which they did. Jalen Green, Isaiah Todd playing really well, but the player that I think really helped him get there was Amir Johnson, who went 12 of 12, was pulling Giannis before Giannis even did his thing. And that was a huge help in getting them into the playoffs. So they got in as the 8 seed and lost to the 1 seed. And the G League playoffs, I think, finish up tomorrow, if I am not mistaken, though. Maybe the format is, because right now it's saying Lakeland and Santa Cruz play again, which is strange because Lakeland beat Santa Cruz today and Delaware beat Raptors 5. So Delaware, so it must be a misprint, but so Delaware is playing Lakeland in the G League finals on Thursday. And we're seeing teams claim NCAA tournament bids. It's a really interesting time. And people
were telling, people that tune into the TV tonight at the time of this recording, March 9th, because BYU and Gonzaga was...
It was pretty close. It was pretty close.
5-ish minutes left.
Yeah, I did watch the end of that game. Jalen Suggs really took over at the end. And I think the fact that Gonzaga has a starting lineup full of All-American candidates is pretty much a huge advantage in their favor. But yeah, BYU certainly scrapped, and at one point I think had a 14-point lead. But yeah, Gonzaga still goes into the NCAA tournament undefeated.
Which, that's always an interesting
accomplishment.
But yeah, pretty awesome.
Especially considering the fact that they played one of the more difficult non-conference schedules this year. So yeah, they played some pretty nice marquee games before the season started. Played a really couple of tough Big 12 teams. I guess the Auburn game in retrospect wasn't as difficult as one might have thought, but yeah, they certainly had been tested, and were even supposed to play Baylor at one point. That unfortunately didn't happen. But yeah, it was it's been an interesting year, and we have an idea of who is likely going to win the Wooden Award this year. And a funny thing is that if you win the Wooden Award for the past 10 years, then the odds are you will win the Naismith Award. So we're going to, this week on Viseland, go over the past 10 winners of the Wooden Award and Naismith Award. And, obviously James Naismith, the inventor of the game of basketball, John Wooden, the most NCAA tournament victories, the most NCAA tournament championships of any college coach. And Jace, care to go any further on this topic, or should we just get into it?
Yeah, it's just I think again, it's college basketball player of the year for the regular season. And it's also just an interesting way to look back as well. Cause again, it's not necessarily an indicator of pro success. And sometimes there are those guys too that are have the, go off in the tournament. So, it's just an interesting kind of award to really take that zoom out and look back on. But it's always you're always rooting for your guy from your school to go ahead and get that award, because obviously awards always look great. But we'll start off. We're going through the 10 last Wooden Awards, and we're going to kind of rank the guys there. And starting off at number 10.
Yeah, so we're going to, the ranking is going to be by kind of how we've seen their NBA careers play out, or kind of how they would be ranked right now. So yeah, it's a pretty loose ranking, but yeah, you'll see a definite tier system as we move forward. And we'll start with a player who is not currently in the NBA and has had a few little go-rounds and is still playing pro basketball. But Jimmer Fredette was the winner of the Wooden and Naismith Award in 2010-11. And he was also the leading scorer in the NCAA that season.
Yeah, I mean, he's like almost 29 points a game. Like he was definitely flaming, and obviously, like I think he'd had like a decent, junior year as well. So like there's a lot of buzz on him going in, but unfortunately, like he's kind of at that interesting point of like a bit of a two guard style match, like in the body of a point guard. Like he just wasn't able to like really replicate that like scoring in the NBA. Like I mean, his high started off his rookie year in Sacramento. He was getting 7.6 points a game, and then kind of just leveled out. Fizzled.
Yeah, let's talk more about Jimmer at the college level though, because he did have a good junior year leading up to it and had quite a bit of hype going into senior season. And the thing with Jimmer is this was before, the Splash Brothers, and Stephen Curry was in the NBA, but the three-point shooting wasn't as prevalent. And Jimmer would pull, like he would pull from very deep. And it was just really exciting. They played a style where he just kind of had carte blanche and could fire from anywhere. And it worked. Like it was BYU was one of the better teams in the NCAA that season. They were a number 3 seed. They finished 32-5 on the year, and were one of the top teams in the Mountain West. And they end up losing to Florida in the Sweet 16. So they even go a couple rounds in the NCAA tournament, which I think certainly helped Jimmer as well, because there was just more eyes seeing him. And so he was kind of seen as the golden boy of college basketball that year, with BYU kind of usually having a pretty successful basketball program, but I don't think ever the level of success to the point where Jimmer was there.
Yeah, I think that's where they had the most, like the most high ranking probably that they've had in a long time. Like because again, they were more like a much like up tempo kind of team, and he was a big Sports Center darling. Like he was on. Definitely people loved him. There was kind of that fevered buzz around him, and like just pretty.
He would really get up on his jump shot too. Like he had really good elevation. It was just to the point where he was kind of I think he was a bit of a polarizing draft prospect. But like Jason was saying earlier, kind of more of the scoring guard as opposed to the facilitator. The other thing that I think people legitimately worried about Jimmer is his defensive responsibility, let's say at BYU, was very slim. Like he conserved a lot of energy on that end of the floor to expound as the kind of heliocentric force of the BYU offense. And so averaged 29 points per game as a senior, was the 10th pick in the NBA draft. He was one pick ahead of a player who would go on to be considered one of the best shooters in NBA history. And I'm guessing at the time they would probably compare the two as far as shooting profile. But Klay Thompson went one pick after Jimmer Fredette. So Sacramento decided on Jimmer over Klay Thompson. At the time, obviously, that was something that I think not very many people expected Klay Thompson to be a top 10 pick. In retrospect, he should be a top 5 pick.
He squeezed in between Klay Thompson and Kemba as well. And Kemba,
they did.
Like Kemba's the guy too that obviously was a contender for that award, but like in the tournament.
2011 was the year of Kemba Walker.
Starting with the Big East tournament, like they had that like 16 million overtime game against Syracuse. Like Kemba just fueled that.
The game against Pitt where he hit the game winner. And he really carried their team in the NCAA tournament as well, which they eventually won that year. And and Kemba was a polarizing draft prospect as well and went in a different direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I think that people just favored Jimmer because he was the leading scorer and everything like that. If you took everything into account, if you took like the whole year into account, then you maybe could give it to a player like Kemba Walker, who like after that season was clearly like. I think the person who you'll most remember from that season is Kemba because of the NCAA tournament run. But yeah, another player who was pretty highly ranked, certainly in draft terms that year, who had a good season was Derek Williams.
Yeah, he was one of those guys too that was great at Arizona, but again, like he had those kind of like didn't really shoot a lot of 3-pointers, kind of thing on his game. But it was an interesting when you look back at this class as well, because like from a college perspective, you really missed out on like two of the top prospects in like Kyrie basically being hurt.
Yeah.
The majority of the year. And then Enes Kanter also like at Kentucky, but not getting to actually play due to NCAA rigmarole.
Terrible.
Well, yeah, that's like the hard thing of that season too, is like, man, if Kyrie got to actually like play and have like a year, like he
looked fantastic at the start of the year. And even when they end up losing to Arizona, he had, I believe, 28 points in that game and was looking great. I know there was certainly, at least among some of the people I was talking with, the conversation between Derek Williams and Kyrie Irving, but I was firmly in the school of the Kyrie Irving being the best NBA prospect in that draft. But yes, Derek Williams did have a fantastic year as well. And Nolan Smith for Duke had an excellent year also. But yeah, I think if you were going to give the player of the year, obviously Jimmer was kind of the runaway favorite because of his scoring prowess and also like spectacular shooting at a really high volume and high difficulty as well.
Yeah, and, he was not afraid to shoot it at any time.
But the Big East was also a beast that year, and Kemba had a hell of a year. So, yeah, and nonetheless, Jimmer's fleeting NBA status. There's maybe one player who you could argue in the last 10 years who you could kind of argue between the two in terms of how their careers will shape out. But yeah, that next player we'll go to is Frank Mason. And Frank Mason was just like this player who started off like, I think even like him getting to Kansas, it was kind of like one of those like late blooming kind of things, and just got better and better as time went on. And by his final year there, was averaging 21 points per game, 5.2 assists, 4.2 rebounds. Had always shot pretty well since his sophomore season, but definitely upped the volume. And yeah, just was, I think the way people would probably describe Frank Mason is like a bulldog. He was just one of those guys. And Kansas had a great team that year. They were on that huge run of winning Big 12 like regular seasons, and they had a few other NBA players on the team. They had Josh Jackson, Devontae Graham, who was playing really well, Svi Mikhailuk, who had kind of come into his own a little bit, a freshman, Udoka Azubuike, who didn't play like a ton, but certainly had a bench presence. And they end up losing in the Elite Eight to Oregon.
Yeah, but like Frank Mason in that game was friggin' super, as a Duck fan, super frustrating.
Yeah. And it was a 74-60 loss. Ducks, of course, have a great team, and this was their way of getting into the NCAA tournament. Tremendous game from Tyler Dorsey, who finishes with 27 points. And Frank Mason in that game did score 21 points on 8 of 20 shooting. But as Jason said, he was definitely a very tough cover.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was kind of an interesting season in that, like, Frank Mason would be the NCAA Player of the Year. I think he's not who you would kind of typically see in that kind of role, but yeah, it was really hard to say that anybody played better than Frank Mason during that season. And yeah, so he goes into the draft and he ends up as a second round pick, I want to say.
Yeah, he was picked in the second round, so he was the fourth pick in the second round.
He was a 34th pick, yeah, by the Kings, who had kind of I think they certainly had a couple other point guards that they were bringing in as well. They had just drafted De'Aaron Fox, and they had George Hill. So, yeah, pretty crowded backcourt there. And Frank does average 7.9 points as a rookie, but the Kings are 27-55. And since then, it's just been kind of finding a place for him. Like last year, he did play only 9 games for Milwaukee. And like definitely decent averages and everything like that. This year, he's only played 4 games for Orlando, and yeah, just still really trying to find his place in the NBA, still trying to fight as like a backup point guard. And
I think the expectations were different for him coming out of college, obviously, than like Jimmer, like Fardette.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think for him, it was just like, he was a good senior leader of a strongly ranked, like a good blue bloody team. That's kind of how he gets to that point. Because yeah, you look at like there were, there definitely were some other guys that were up there. You had Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball. Like, I don't know if he would have, could have gone to that Player of the Year, but like he was just one of those players. Like I remember the first time we saw him playing in high school, that you're like, this is a good player. Like, yeah. And UCLA, like he was, capable of just a lot of pretty awesome things.
Yeah, he certainly had a fantastic freshman year in college. But yeah, I don't recall Lonzo being in the running for NCAA Player of the Year. Yeah,
that's like Justin Jackson again.
He was certainly in the running for Pac-12 Player of the Year, which I don't think he got either. I believe that went to Dylan Brooks, but
yeah, Dylan Brooks won Pac-12 Player of the Year in his last year there. But Justin Jackson as well, because like was also someone who was like had that long length that he used a lot at UNC, and obviously they went on to win the title that year against Gonzaga in a game where it's like physically, North Carolina was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I would say that Frank was firmly deserved to be the NCAA Player of the Year that season, based on college performance. But yeah, just in terms of how they've translated to the NBA and where we would rank them right now, I think he's definitely the bottom of the list of players who are currently in the NBA.
And then moving on, we got the latest last year's winner. We got Obi Toppin.
Yeah, and you would think he at least I don't know. I guess part of it is the situation that
early and still early. So obviously, a lot can change.
Yeah, it's the situation that he's in right now. He's behind a player who has blossomed into an NBA All-Star this past year in Julius Randle. The Knicks are actually competing for a playoff spot, which is not something that we would have predicted before the season started. And Tom Thibodeau is kind of bringing along the rookie pretty slowly. And but yeah, let's get into Obadiah Toppin as an NCAA player. And the thing with Obi last year is he led the NCAA with 107 dunks. I'll say that when I saw him as a freshman, I was watching a Dayton game and just saw this guy with this vertical athleticism that was really impressive. So he immediately just jumped out to me. And then you see him a little more and you're like, wow, this guy can really play. And he just was an absolute dominant offensive force last year. And I think well deserving of the NCAA Player of the Year, the Wooden Award, the Naismith Award. It would have been so great to see him in the NCAA tournament and see that Dayton, because they were a fun team also. Like they ended up finishing 18-0 in the A10. They were runner-up in the Maui Invitational. They were 29-2 on the season. They had a player like Jalen Crutcher, who was a really nice shooting guard, Trey Landers, E.B. Watson, and they were just like a really fun offense. And Obi could just kind of play his role as a defender. That was, I think, a major concern that people had as far as him as a draft prospect. But offensively, he just brought so much to the table. He was a great short roll passer. He shot really well. It wasn't a huge sample size, but it was good enough where over the past couple seasons, he had shot well from 3-point range, and you believed in his touch, not necessarily like an out of this world free throw shooter either. But yeah, I think you certainly believe that he would shoot. And just since he's been in the NBA, it doesn't seem like he, at least from everything I've heard, because I haven't watched a ton of Knicks this year, but the way that they are apparently using him is not necessarily to his strengths, not necessarily like in the pick and roll, going downhill as a slasher. Like those are areas where he really excelled. And it seems like they haven't necessarily put him in those situations as of yet. So, and then the other thing is that Obi was a redshirt sophomore and was a little bit older for class. So, he was actually pretty much the age of an NCAA senior. So many felt like he was a little bit more ready than other draft prospects, and that hasn't necessarily been the case as of yet.
It's also the Knicks, but yeah, no, it's just, again, like, it's sad for him.
But they're challenging for the playoffs, Jason.
No, they're doing well.
I'm going to push back on that.
I know. I'm sorry. I just don't like the Knicks generally. But no, totally. I think
I understand.
They're actually doing well. All right, but yeah, no, it's just sad there was no NCAA tournament last year, because again, like, he's one of those players that you would have loved to have seen.
Yeah, Dayton was a contender.
Like, yeah, like
it would have been like a 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah, like lead his team into that position, but yeah, like, looking back on, people that are competing with him for the award, I mean, he's definitely, like, Obi was the, that guy. Like, when you kind of look around, like, at the field, I mean, like, some other, like, names, like, for me, like, I think, like, Luca Garza, obviously, and he'll be up there this year. Marcus Howard, Peyton Pritchard from the Ducks, but I mean, that was probably not going to happen. But I will settle for the Kuzi Award any day, point guard of the year, which Peyton was able to take home. But yeah, it's tough because you just don't have that, like, NCAA, like, tournament championship, like, legacy. I don't know. It's just like, for me, like, that always brings back so much great memories of so many, like, players, that are in the NBA, is like remembering them, like, when they did have those tournament runs, or when they, they were playing in those championship type games. So it's kind of always just sad to see that taken away, but obviously a lot of other stuff going on that made it so. But yeah, Obi, it'll be interesting to see, what the next couple of years, because again, if the Knicks become a playoff team, I mean, again, like, where is he going to fit into that, in the roadmap? Because obviously, like, Julius is kind of like, the big post presence.
They have to worry about re-signing Julius. That's the big thing, I think, also, because I think he's in the last year of his deal.
Yeah, but I think you're more apt to stick around if things are going well.
Yeah, exactly. That's just, where I think that's going to factor into what they end up doing with Obi.
Yeah. And so
he does have one more year. Yeah, Julius has one more season after this.
And for you, like, was there any other guys last year you thought would, like, kind of had a chance at the award? Because again, like,
no, I think Obi was
he's pretty
on shoulders above the rest. Yeah, pretty
consensus there. But moving on to number 7, we have 2015. We got Frank the Tank Kaminsky.
Yes,
taking home that award from Wisconsin. Definitely they'd had a good run the year before as well.
Guess who was lucky enough to see, sorry if I interrupted you, but I was lucky enough to see Frank Kaminsky in 2013 when Wisconsin did a tour of Canadian universities. So I saw him the summer before he blew up into one of the best players in college basketball. And I watching Wisconsin, the big player that you heard about was Sam Decker. They had a couple nice freshmen in Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig. But yeah, Frank Kaminsky really stood out. He was like, he looked like a pretty big deal. And I remember I immediately went home and made a profile for Frank Kaminsky on NBADraft.net.
Well, because he was like a very, you know, he's a 7-foot guy that, yeah, like he stretched the floor pretty well.
That he had ball skills. He was a great passer too. Yeah. Like he just provided a lot of offensive versatility.
Well, but because they ran everything, you know, like when you look back at some of those games, like, I mean, they ran everything really through him, and it was pretty awesome.
They had a couple fantastic seasons. But yeah, also in that same vein, Frank Kaminsky, in 2013, Wisconsin did indeed, on that Canadian tour, lose to Carleton University. Just wanted to throw that out there.
For those who aren't, Carleton is
that same year, they barely, so 2013-14, when Frank is playing his junior season, they barely lose to Kentucky on a last second shot. And Frank was, you know, the leading scorer for that team. And he decides that he wants to come back for one more season. He announces it kind of like ceremoniously. And Sam Decker comes back as well. And they have a pretty special season. And what ended up happening there is they got their sweet revenge and they beat that monster Kentucky team that had the reinforcements. And so they beat that team with Karl Anthony Towns, Devin Booker, the Harrison twins, and
Willie Cauley-Stein. I mean, like another big body as well.
Aaron Harrison had sunk them the year before with the last second shot to get Kentucky into the NCAA tournament finals. And they end up beating that team, but then they come up a little short to Duke in the final that year. And I think, honestly, one of the players who I felt maybe could have battled Kaminsky for Player of the Year was Jahlil Okafor.
Yeah, I mean, Jahlil was definitely a go-to post guy for Duke. I mean, I was high on Jahlil in the draft too. I remember the Lakers had that second pick, and I was on team Jahlil over D'Angelo Russell, which obviously
really, yeah,
don't listen to me. Well, because
I honestly probably was too. I loved Jahlil Okafor. I thought, like, you know, just that footwork and everything there. I didn't take into account that he couldn't play defense.
I felt like a skilled post player. You know, Kobe was still going. You know, like I just thought that would be versus like just bringing in another guard, which I feel like they could get other players to be guard, but then they could have, you know.
Yeah, D'Angelo was pretty spectacular that year, and I think, like, initially at least looked like a pretty decent pick there. In retrospect, there were a few other options. The guy who they probably should have drafted, who was at least in that range, not knowing that Devin Booker would turn out to be like much better than either of them. Kristaps Porzingis went forth, and I remember one thing I'll give Chad Ford credit for is in his grade A mock, he had the Lakers taking Kristaps Porzingis, and you won't see me giving him credit for too much else, but just for that pick, I'll say he did a pretty good job. Frank Kaminsky is, I want to say, somebody that the person who owned Charlotte apparently really loved.
Yeah, no, he was.
And
they take it with the 9th pick.
Yeah, and what I will say is, like, while we have Frank Kaminsky at the 7th spot here, it's hard to say that he's like better than the next guy, or that he's worse than the next guy. I think he is probably a little bit better of a role player. It's pretty close. I know that he did kind of have a situation before coming back to Phoenix where he was on another team. But he actually, like, he's a pretty valuable role player because he's such a great passer. He does have those ball skills. Still not like a terrific defender or anything like that, but it gives you a little bit of a different look at center. And I thought he played well for Phoenix last year. They decided to bring him back, and I think it's working out right now, and he's been pretty good for them.
No, totally. I think, like, again, that ability to
he's waived by Sacramento earlier in the year
versus like compared to like Ayton, it gives you that different look. But yeah, no, Frank is one of those, like, he's gonna be, a journeyman big probably the remainder of his career versus, like, looking at some other guys from that draft that ended up, obviously Cat, D'Angelo Russell's had a pretty successful run there, Devin Booker, as you mentioned. But no, Frank in college was like pretty awesome, because he was like one of those, like what Kristaps Porzingis did in the NBA. It was just like he was a big dude that was really able to really handle and make a lot of things happen. So super exciting college guy. But you see there's kind of this correlation, well, not a complete correlation, but yeah, you'll see like later when there's like freshmen versus like some of the kind of upperclassmen kind of thing. It's definitely a pretty interesting like trend in college basketball. But number 6, we have 2013 Michigan. We got Trey Burke, who was again just a great scorer from like pretty much everywhere on the court. Was really pretty tough competitor, and took Michigan to the finals.
Yeah, he had a tremendous freshman season, and was kind of seen as somebody who I don't think he was ranked really highly in the RSCI, but I'd heard like rumblings about him, and like just kind of really stood out as a NCAA freshman. And then as a sophomore, he was getting like, I know this sounds crazy now, but like people were comparing him to like Chris Paul. Like they thought that he was just doing some tremendous things that season.
He was the the engine that made that team. That team.
He had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I think the major thing between he and Chris Paul is that he isn't like near the athlete he is, not to mention the fact that like the playmaking probably had some other factors, and but he shot really well. He was really good in pick and roll. He I don't think was necessarily like the level of isolation creator or ball handler that Chris Paul was. But yeah, he certainly, like, he was just a real show in his 2 years at Michigan, and particularly that last season. I remember against, I guess it was against Syracuse, where he hit that huge game-winning shot.
Like a game, like like almost like half-courty game winner. And again, like he was just he put them into that final. I mean, that Louisville team was very strong, but technically Louisville did get stripped of that title due to Rick Pitino thingies. So he could rest as a sort of loser to nobody.
I'm gonna fight back on that one and say that they lost the NCAA tournament that year.
It's always funny to look back at that because like Michigan didn't win.
Yeah, they unfortunately can't go back and play the game again. So yeah, it happened, and the NCAA is ridiculous for that one. But it was a great year for Michigan. Obviously, part of John Beilein's like coaching legacy there, and the previous year they had lost in I guess it was called the second round, but it was technically the first round, and they have a really nice path to the national finals, and they gave Louisville a really good run. Then in the NBA, Trey Burke, I wouldn't say like didn't live up to the hype. Like he was the 11th pick or the 9th pick, sorry. And yeah, like that was a strange draft. And the guy who goes like directly behind him is a player who I think is like everything you kind of wanted Trey Burke to be if you wanted him to be like this amazing shooting, scoring guard in CJ McCollum. So yeah, very strange draft, but I have to say like Trey Burke, like not one of like the worst picks of that draft. And then he comes, basically gets signed by Dallas like late in the season and plays pretty well for them and seems to have at least like found a bit of a role as like that scoring guard off of the bench, which I don't think is an optimal player as your first pick. And like, yeah, Utah certainly wasn't like, I think blown away by what Trey Burke brought to the table. They never made the playoffs in his 3 years there. But it seems like he's at least found a role, and he is a really good shooter and like one of those guys you can play with like a jumbo initiator in Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I think it's a good role of that, like again, that like energy scoring guard.
Yeah. And like shooting really well from three. So yeah, just a guy that can stretch the floor and score in a few different ways.
And there was, Trey was great. Some other guys that were kind of up there. I mean, Victor Oladipo was himself a year at Indiana. You had Otto Porter at Georgetown as well, who was having a pretty strong year. And then as a junior, Doug McDermott from Creighton was also, again, like a first team All-American.
Mm-hmm.
But Trey was definitely like the toughest player in college basketball that year. Like, whereas like obviously
it was a really good year for him, and yeah, it was understandable that he won the player of the year. And let's move on to his current teammate in Dallas, who I think is having a year where he's really coming into his own, and that is Jaylen Bronson. And yeah, Jason, what were your memories of Jaylen Bronson in college?
Villanova championships. I mean, like I think again, like Villanova's always about that like kind of guard play. So it's just something that is part of their kind of their DNA. So like his last year, I mean, he's getting like 19 points a game, like just under 5 assists, and just really again like engine that's like helping that team run. And I mean, Jay Wright was on a good streak. They'd won a couple years earlier, and Jaylen Bronson was a part of that team as well. But yeah, I thought he was a pretty strong quick. And when you look around at the other players that year as well, it's like there were a lot of kind of underclassmen, whereas Jaylen Bronson again was like an established upperclassman that could really like lead a college basketball team.
Yeah. He was somebody that I was lucky enough to see in high school a couple times, in the Nike Global Challenge in 2014 in Chicago. I remember saying to my friend sitting next to me that he was from Chicago. I was corrected immediately that he's from Lincolnshire or Lincolnshire, and that was where he's from. I saw his dad hanging around there as well, Rick Brunson. And honestly, Steven Zimmerman won the player of the tournament for the Nike Global Challenge. The guy who played the best during the Nike Global Challenge was Jaylen Bronson. He was great. I just don't think the Midwest had necessarily the team that the West did. But yeah, Jaylen Bronson was great. You could see the court vision, the shooting, his ability to get to the paint, even if he wasn't this like out of this world athlete. But also like, I think his athleticism has always been a little bit underrated. But yeah, just a really steady player. Immediately comes to Villanova and helps them win the championship. And then the year that they won the championship, he did have another like lottery pick level guy in Mikal Bridges, and of course a great team. But yeah, it was he just had a fantastic like 2 championships in 3 years college career. And actually the player that won most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament during his junior season is now a starter for one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and that's Dante DiVincenzo. And they also had Omari Spellman. They had Eric Pascal. I remember Omari Spellman and Eric Pascal giving fits to last year's Defensive Player of the Year, Udoka Azubuike. And just great teams at Villanova, but he was a huge part of them winning some championships. And I just think that he's another guy who I think is a little bit more of an apt playmaker than a player like Trey Burke, and can kind of fulfill those secondary playmaking duties. For the most part, has come off the bench this season and is really kind of worked his way into playing quite well with Luka Doncic. Is really upped his 2-point field goal percentage this year, while also shooting 40% from 3.
He's getting 25 minutes a game. So yeah, he's earned a pretty good role.
Playing really well.
Yeah. On again, like a hopeful.
I think his, like the way that he's been playing is one of the keys to Dallas, who started off the year really slow, working their way back into playoff contention.
And then who are some other guys that you were thinking like that year that were kind of up in that same conversation for Player of the Year?
I would say, certainly one of them was a guy who I think took the NCAA by storm, but I just wasn't necessarily as efficient, and his team wasn't as good, and that was Trae Young. I felt like 2018 was a year where Trae Young really stood out. Led the NCAA in scoring and assists as a freshman.
Such huge scoring games.
Yeah. And then also had like that amazing start to the season as far as non-conference play. Once the Big 12 play came around, he slowed down a bit and also had he led the NCAA in turnovers by, I think, like a really large margin. Maybe a larger margin than
they did the long ball. And he was
he was a lot of fun.
Yeah, he was a ton of fun and like a very Sports Center darling. Like people wanted to see what he was doing and how much he was scoring volume wise. I mean, DeAndre Ayton was the first pick. Has a pretty good year at Arizona, but again doesn't like get to that like National Player of the Year type talk. But he goes 2010, but yeah.
I don't think was in like the real running. It was. I think that the major 2 players from that year were indeed Jaylen Bronson and Trae Young.
No, definitely in the point guards, there. But yeah, it's interesting to look back on that draft because obviously it became the draft of Luka for Trae Young. Like that's kind of still the talk of that draft. But yeah, from a draft perspective, obviously Jaylen Bronson, being again, a lot of Villanova guards are kind of smaller, scrappier. Yeah, he ends up going in the second round, but I think Dallas has been
ridiculous.
Good spot.
I definitely was a proponent of Jaylen Bronson going a lot higher than what he ended up going.
Sometimes that's just how they look at shorter players.
Yeah.
They get that.
I thought Dallas getting Jaylen Bronson at 33 was a great pick. And it turns out that so far it's looking like it's so.
Yeah. I mean, for again, second round value, like he's averaging double digits right now. That's good enough to go. But moving on to 2014, we have our number 4. He was someone that mentioned just briefly a couple minutes ago there in 2013, because he was also very hot on that Player of the Year contention the year before. But as a senior, he's able to take it home. We got Dougie McBucket.
And he was almost like similar to Jimmer Fredette in like his long college legacy.
No, totally. And his ability to score. I mean, his last year, he's getting, I mean, he had after his freshman year, he averages 20 points or more each season. His senior year, he's getting 26.7 points a game. He's shooting about 45% from three. So again, taking a lot, making a good amount as well. So definitely somebody that was having an amazing year, also playing for I'll just mention this super briefly, playing for his father.
Yes.
Who's probably not going to be
been in the news lately.
Yeah, been in the news lately, not for the best of reasons. But yeah, it's also one of those like one shining moments things, like his last game, and he's like crying, and his dad's there, and it's like, it's a whole.
Not only was he crying, but they were a number 3 seed, and they got their asses handed to them. They lost by 30 points. So in the second round, and yeah, nonetheless, we were able to get a nice up close look at Doug McDermott as a freshman. As I don't know if you recall this, Jace, Oregon played Creighton in the CBI.
Oh yeah, Dane Altman's first year. Oh
yeah.
Oh snap.
Yeah. We had a CBI meeting. They don't even have it like listed on college basketball reference, but yeah, we played those 3 games. They actually win the first game, and Oregon, it was the best 2 out of 3, and Oregon wins the next 2 games.
And we won on an over and back trap when we didn't have a half
court. And everybody was saying that the court that they thought was so hideous was eventually going to get us an advantage, and it did.
It did, yeah, because it was a subjective call, and
it was like that was a pivotal moment, and likely won the Ducks the game.
I love it, but you know what? The Boston Celtics built a legacy of having certain floors on their, certain spots on their floor that wouldn't bounce, and the Celtics would trap you in those dead zones as well. So you gotta use what you're given. I mean, baseball makes their diamonds.
I think you're comparing to the dominant Celtics teams of the 80s versus the Oregon CBI team.
The CBI champion Oregon Ducks are definitely one of those teams. It's like the Russell Celtics, you got the 86 Celtics, and then if you're talking about green teams, that CBI team led by Jovan Catron.
So yeah, I was lucky enough, so seeing Doug McDermott as a freshman in those 3 games against Oregon, I was like, okay, this is a guy that you really have to keep an eye on. And that turned out to absolutely be the case. As you know, I think there were legitimate possibilities of him entering the draft the next couple years, because he was a fantastic outside shooter. I think the major difference between he and Jimmer in terms of longevity is that Doug McDermott is also 6'8". And not only that, but Doug McDermott is like a guy who is, I think, even a more proficient shooter than Jimmer Fredette. Granted, he probably can't take the same level of difficulty, but like Jimmer, the issue that Doug McDermott had was on the defensive end, and like his stocks rating in college was abysmal. Always was, and that was one of the big concerns in terms of his translation to the NBA. And you can't say that Dougie McBuckets is necessarily like translated to the NBA in a major way, but he's been a really nice role player for Indiana since he's gotten there. He started off with Chicago. I remember when I got to go to Summer League in 2015, and I believe Chicago had one of the top seeds, and seeing Norman Powell shut down Doug McDermott, which I thought was wonderful. So he was a first team AP All-American his last 3 seasons in college. And he was also the 11th pick in 2014 NBA draft, and was originally drafted by the Denver Nuggets. And we will see the Denver Nuggets make some, they're famous, of course, for the Donovan Mitchell and Trey Lyles trade. I believe they might have even traded the rights to Rudy Gobert to Utah also. They should probably stop trading with those guys. But
take that.
made a trade with the Chicago Bulls. This was the case where Chicago actually was the one that got screwed in the trade. Chicago trades for the rights to Doug McDermott, and Denver gets the rights to Yusuf Nurkic and Gary Harris. And yeah, so Anthony Randolph was part of that trade as well, and it was a future second-round pick. But needless to say, Denver gets like 2 stud role players, and I think you would probably much rather have Gary Harris at this point than Dougie McBucks. They do eventually trade Yusuf Nurkic, of course, in the famous Mason Plumlee trade, which didn't necessarily like kill it for them, but whatever. Nonetheless, Dougie McBuckets was not an amazing trade for Chicago, and they eventually trade him to Oklahoma City. He goes to the Knicks. He goes to Dallas. He was a bit of a journeyman there for a while, and has found a home in Indiana and playing a nice role with the Pacers. And currently, he's only shooting 36.4% from 3 this year, but the 2 previous seasons over 40% from 3. And still a guy that is going to get you buckets. Like that's what he's been well known for.
No, and he's just a shooter. Coming in the court and just kind of giving you that. But yeah, obviously defensively, he's never going to be that guy that you're probably going to have on the court in the last minute, to really shut.
Actually, something. In college, he got just like a lot of great off-ball points too, and then was really good in the post. So yeah, he just was able to use his size and touch to his advantage there.
And he had a great college career. But
Indeed.
It's one of those
3,150 points. That's pretty incredible.
But it's also again, it's interesting. Like you talk about him, you talk about Jimmer Fredette. It's also interesting because they're both in the same year where you look at the end of the season, it's like UConn, led by some point guard, because Shabazz Napier obviously tears it up in the tournament. Like some other good guys that year as well. I think Nick Johnson was pretty strong leader there on Arizona. You had Russ Smith, Louisville. But yeah, definitely Doug McDermott was
Doug was the clear-cut player of the year that year, for sure. I think you usually see it tends to go to a player that really deserves it. And I guess the one player, because I was looking at the NABC player of the year, and I saw one discrepancy there, I believe. And that was, I guess, with in 2016. So that would have been the season of
the next our number 3.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, I thought Buddy Hield was pretty clear-cut player of the year that year, but there was a player who did have a really great all-around season and is a nice role player for the Chicago Bulls currently, Denzel Valentine. But yeah, Buddy was somebody who just worked. Now, from Bahamas, at the time we thought he was born in a different year. That changed over time. So yeah, he may have been a little bit older for class, but nonetheless comes into college and people are like, well, we're really not sure about this guy as a shooter. And by the time he leaves college, he's making 4 3-pointers per game on 45.7% shooting.
And I had I was at the regional final that year, the West Regional Final. So I saw Oregon beat Duke on the Thursday, and then I came back on the Saturday, and Buddy Hield went to work. And that was not so much fun.
Oregon being a 1 seed too.
From an Oregon fandom perspective, but yeah, after you had to believe in that. He was just really shooting the lights out of the ball.
Yeah, Buddy was just a prolific scorer during his last year in Oklahoma. had been on the radar, I think the couple years before, but yeah, just really came into his own that last season.
Yeah, like looking at his senior year, like it's definitely you see that, that wave.
Yeah, I was able to see Buddy the year before his senior year at Adidas Nations, and he was one of the standout college counselors there. I got there really early, and the two players that had gotten there earlier than I did to shoot and train were one-time Oklahoma commit Peyton Pritchard, working out with Oklahoma player Buddy Hield. So yeah, it was just showing that work ethic, and that was something that was constantly, I guess, highlighted about Buddy Hield. And so I know there was like a conversation about Buddy in terms of as a draft prospect, and eventually is traded to Sacramento in the trade with that brought DeMarcus Cousins to New Orleans. Buddy was indeed the 6th pick in the draft. And I recall hardcore going to bat for the player that was drafted directly after him, Jamal Murray. I felt like Jamal Murray was the better prospect of the two. I still think that, and I think that their careers kind of reflect that. But at the same time, Buddy Hield has had a really solid NBA career to this point. Obviously, in Sacramento, has not had a chance to go to the playoffs as of yet, and it does not appear that this is going to be the first year where that is so. And then he does sign an extension with Sacramento, but you're kind of wondering how much longer he's going to be there, if he's part of their future plans, considering the fact that they are most likely, well, definitely building around De'Aaron Fox, and now with the wonderful play of rookie Tyrese Halliburton. Buddy, even last year, Buddy was coming off the bench for Bogdan Bogdanovic. I don't think was incredibly happy with his role. He's still averaging 16.4 points per game. But yeah, it's just I know some people questioned Buddy and just felt he was maybe like a bit one-dimensional. It seems like his numbers are definitely down on a per minute basis this season. And from an analytics perspective, not exactly fantastic. But I still think like there's probably a team out there that could use a player like him.
Yeah, I think his one dimension is something, you know, that definitely like a lot of teams would like to bring probably off the bench and kind of get that ability.
His contract is expensive. That's the major thing. He's making $24 million this year, but it goes down over time. So next year, 22, the year after that, 20, and then the year after that, close to 19 million. But yeah, still making a fair amount of money for a player that you're not necessarily like, you know, gung-ho about being one of your like top wing players, I guess. But yeah, he still like the shooting that he brings to the table has been on volume and very impressive. He is taking over 10 3-pointers this year, making almost 4 per game at 37% and a bit. So yeah, Buddy still has been a pretty successful player. Would have been nice to know that he was born in 1992 instead of 1993 at the time of the draft, but I don't think it would have made a huge difference, honestly.
Yeah, it's just it was one of those things that was always just kind of floating around there. But yeah, so like you have Buddy number 3, and that really ends it for our, you know, this like a certain tier, because then you move into this other strata with the last 2, and it's like these are just insane freshmen that are just dominant, you know, like really bringing something special. So who do we have at number 2?
Yeah, I think the only other freshman who like could be considered close to as dominant, though it was obviously in fewer minutes and like I would say even a lesser scale than these two, was Karl Anthony Towns, who while he might have been in the running for Player of the Year, like it likely wasn't going to win it because of the whole situation in Kentucky with the minutes played, even though they were a great team. But yeah, number 2, we have, I want to say, like, probably the best college player that I've evaluated since I've been hardcore into the NBA draft. And first time All-Star this season, it's Zion Williamson. And Zion Williamson, they updated Box Plus Minus on College Basketball Reference, and he is still head and shoulders above everybody as he was before. Just was tremendously dominant as a freshman at Duke. He shot 73.9% around the basket, according to Synergy. So he was 161 of 218. Barely took jump shots. Like, he, wasn't a big pull-up shooter or anything like that, but was just so incredibly proficient getting to the basket. Got to the free throw line as well, but only shot 64% there. Did shoot 34% from the college three-point line, was 24 of 71. Did, of course, miss some time that season. So I think actually, like, RJ Barrett might have won some ACC Player of the Year awards. But
yeah, RJ was on the radar, but yeah, it's just like it's the kind of thing, like, once Zion steps on the court, the folks.
Well, he was simply like the most dominant player in college basketball.
He busted through a pair of shoes. He literally was so explosive. He put his foot on the ground to make a step, and the shoe did not want to come with it.
Yeah, it exploded. He also just had so many incredible highlight plays that season. I think the one that stands out the most is the three-point block on DeAndre Hunter, and you could say, oh, DeAndre Hunter has slow release and so on and so forth. It was just an incredible athletic play. It's ability to get there. Plays every game. Yeah. He'd have at least 2 or 3 plays every game that would just make your jaw drop. Was a dominant high school player as well. And while he wasn't considered he was, I think, number 2 in the RSCI. But he was, or was he 2 or 3?
Let me just double check the RSCI.
Yeah. Oh, he was number 4.
But you had, like, I mean, Nasir Little's the one name that doesn't stand out as much there, but yeah, you had RJ number 1, Cam Reddish.
Nasir had actually kind of taken it to him in the McDonald's All-American game. So that was the thing. Zion did break his hand in that game, but so that kept him out of some of the other high school all-star games. Wasn't available for the Nike Hoop Summit, though he was there in Portland and was the center of many an interview scrum, because he was also, while he wasn't necessarily, people didn't really know what to do with him as an NBA prospect, but he was still a huge name in marketing and had all these incredible highlight videos because
YouTube like legend.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
Oh. I was lucky enough to see him at USA Basketball, and to me, he and Cam Reddish both were head and shoulders above all the other prospects there. And Zion was just able to get to the basket at will. And like, while he has the strange kind of like walking and jogging style, it seems like when he runs, he's just like in a different world. And yeah, like he's somebody who, like, almost, like the character in The Prestige that puts a full fishbowl between his legs and then is just kind of walking like he's an old man and everything, even though he's incredibly strong, just to pull the facade. But like, that's almost like Zion Williamson, in that he, like, just walks and shuffles up the court, and you're like, what is going on with this guy? And then all of a sudden, as soon as that acceleration goes.
Yeah, when it's also like something like speed with the ball in the hand, like when when it's needed.
It's even beyond speed with like on cuts. Like that's the other thing, like speed without the ball. And then he has these amazing strong hands and the vertical athleticism that is out of this world. Granted, at the All-Star game, he did miss I would say 7 dunks.
Yeah,
I'm being a little hyperbolic.
But I think that's probably what John Morant was also saying at his high school AAU running mate there. But yeah, he was like, yeah, that's why you don't want to go in the dunk contest because don't want to miss him.
Oh yeah, John saying he was never going to go in there. Yeah. So nonetheless, Zion Williamson, amazing freshman season at Duke, does end up coming back. Some people kind of projected he may not come back after the whole shoe explosion against North Carolina. Does end up coming back, plays really well. They lose in the Elite Eight to Michigan State. But yeah, he was fantastic. I know he and RJ had similar counting stats, but he was very obviously on a different level in terms of efficiency. And it was crazy that he and RJ averaged the same amount of points per game, but Zion took considerably fewer shots. But for the most part, it worked, just until it didn't work. And but yeah, he was just he was so crazy efficient. And from that first game against Kentucky, his freshman year, where he goes 11 of 13 and was just absolutely unstoppable. Yeah, Zion was a special 1-year experience at Duke, and I think head and shoulders the player of the year, and head and shoulders the number 1 pick in that draft, and has certainly lived up to it. And his second half of the first half of the season, he's been completely unstoppable. And I know people wondered what it would be like once he went up against bigger, more athletic players. It turns out that he's stronger and more athletic than any of them. So yeah, he's still rather unstoppable, and he's not taking very many shots outside the paint, and they still haven't figured out a way to stop him. And I don't think it's going to happen. I don't.
No, totally. He's on this continual all-star trajectory, but
I think he's on an eventual MVP trajectory. But yeah, I think he's sky is definitely the limit for Zion Williamson, and I think he still has another level to get to. But currently, out of these Wooden Award winners, you have to rank him second behind somebody else.
Yeah, because number 1 is, we're talking freshman and just, ridiculous skill set, I guess. You'd say that about Zion, you'd also say that about this guy. And the crazy thing when you think about him in college and how great he was, and you look at what he does now in the NBA, and you're like, man, if he had a couple of those things in college as well, he would have been insaner. And that is Anthony Davis, the brow.
What are those couple of things?
I mean, I really think his ability to just offensively be a little bit more competent. I think the thing that he had in college was just anything, he controlled the paint. Anything inside was his, but I think now he kind of stretches the floor a little bit better and just has a little bit he basically not that he's a great dominant 3-point shooter at this time either, but in Kentucky, he shot 20, he made 3. I just think offensively he's a lot more refined now. Whereas in college, he was just athletically insanely superior to anybody out there.
Yeah. I think you're definitely right that he is much better offensively now than he was in college. I'll push back some, and obviously this stat doesn't necessarily go with everything. He only took 12 jumpers off of the dribble. He made 7 of those. I think in college he was so they were a team that had pretty much a 6-man rotation. And it was Anthony Davis, you had Deron Lamb, Terrence Jones, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marcus Teague, Darius Miller, and Kyle Wiltshire was the 7th man in a 6-man rotation. So yeah, you had those guys, mostly freshmen, with Wiltshire,
Terrence Jones,
and Kidd-Gilchrist. Terrence was a sophomore, actually.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
But yeah, it was. I would say that John Calipari like gave him a very specific role, and didn't really have him playing very much out of that role, and it worked brilliantly. Like that was the other thing. They had 2 losses that season, and one loss was.
Team.
Excuse me.
This is an amazing team. They were an awesome team. Like this is one of the more fun college basketball.
One of the best college basketball teams in recent history. They did have a loss to Vanderbilt, I remember, and they had what was like an incredible last-second loss to Indiana, at Indiana, and that was. I remember watching that game and Christian Watford making the 3-pointer to win at the buzzer, and that was unreal. They also had an incredibly exciting game where they were considered 2 of the best teams in college against North Carolina. And Anthony Davis had a last-second block on John Henson that was pretty fantastic. So, yeah, it was a really special year. And just like I think immediately from the first time I saw Anthony Davis at the Nike Hoop Summit, you saw the chemistry he had with Marcus Teague and with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. And I think the thing that stood out more than anything, like even as you mentioned, like with the offense, Kentucky's defense that year was unreal.
Because he's such he was such a great shot blocker.
Yeah, he's the only player out of this list to because Zion Williamson was a tremendous defender his freshman year at Duke. That's something I don't think I even focused on, but yeah, Zion was averaging I think 2 blocks and 2 steals, and really dynamic defender, putting a lot of effort on that side of the floor. Anthony Davis was unreal. He was like he obviously he was their center. So, kind of given like that spot on the floor, but he was like averaging basically 4.7 blocks per game, 1.4 steals. And like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, I think people kind of forget just how great of a defender he was. Also,
that was his specialty, like his specialty as well.
But yeah, Anthony Davis was absolutely unreal. Like putting up like block numbers that basically like Shaq and like David Robinson put up like when they were in college. Like Hakeem Olajuwon likely didn't even put up stuff like that. Like he was just like throwback in terms of like the insane defensive numbers he was putting up there. Of course, ends up winning the NCAA tournament most outstanding player while only scoring or going 1 of 10 from the field, I believe.
But yeah, like it wasn't like for him. That was the other thing too. Like offensively, he didn't need to do much to still be dominant.
And then the thing I will push back on though is I think he was a really dominant offensive player too. He led their team in scoring. He was averaging 14.2 points per game, and obviously a very collective team effort. You had Duran Lem at 13.7 points per game, 12.3 for Terrence Jones, 11.9 for MKG, 10 for Marcus Teague, and 9.9 for Darius Miller. So it was very much like a share the sugar kind of thing. But when they needed a basket and they really needed somebody to get offense, they would go to Anthony Davis. And like, I was talking about how dominant Zion Williamson was around the basket. Anthony Davis shot 77.5% around the basket, 141 out of 182. And also like just tremendous number of dunks as well. The athleticism, I think, is just so rare at that size. And he was actually like really skinny back then, but it was just like that kind of like wiry strength that he possessed as well. So yeah, it got to the point where there was absolutely no question that he was going to be the player of the year, and had one of the most dominant single seasons in NCAA history. And yeah, he just in terms of box plus minus, he was at 17.2, and I think one of the highest like defensive box plus minuses ever as well. So yeah, the two highest box plus minuses of any college player since they've been, I think since 2010-11, are Zion Williamson, number one at 20.1, and Anthony Davis at 17.2. And then in terms of his play as an NBA player, I think you could say that the rest is history.
Yeah, his rookie year doesn't make an all-star team, but
yeah, it was still good. Was still I think runner up for rookie of the year to Damian Lillard, and since then he's been just dominant. Led the NCAA in block shots, obviously, but led the NBA 3 times in blocks per game, and is the focal point of a defense that still has maintained the number 1 defensive rating even without him, but he's the anchor of that defense and a yearly staple at Defensive Player of the Year, one of the 5 or 10 best players in the NBA, and as you've mentioned, like has stretched his shooting out a tremendous amount. Still not like the most potent 3-point shooter.
No.
Albeit he can shoot from that, but is a tremendous mid-range shooter and just has some great touch close to the basket and from the mid-range.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting looking back on all these award winners as well, because Anthony Davis and Jaylen Bronson, out of the 10 players, they're the only 2 that won the Wooden Award and also won the championship.
Yeah, very true.
It's pretty interesting. But again, but the fact that he also did that as a freshman as well.
Yeah, that was amazing. And yeah, like that's the time where the one and done class, like, and basically the team just worked out. But yeah, it was certainly built around Anthony Davis, and he was a really, really special player.
For sure. And then as we take a look back on all these winners as well, like the other interesting thing that comes up is that kind of class breakdown, right? We had those 2 freshmen, but 2 freshmen, 2 sophomores, 1 junior, 5 seniors. But you kind of seen that, like,
yeah,
kind of ebb a little bit with, depending on some of the classes, but
yeah. And then we also see that the seniors usually, for the most part, haven't gotten drafted in the top 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still college basketball is usually a team sport and kind of goes to those established teams that are built up over time. And even when you bring in special freshman classes, there are usually some upperclassmen that certainly fill out the rest of the team that are pretty important factors to winning NCAA tournament championships. But yeah, that Kentucky team, very special. Duke, I thought was going to be a special team, and they got beat by a team that had a couple absolutely stud college players that were drafted last year. They actually even came back to college, and Xavier Tillman and Cassius Winston. But yeah, it's certainly interesting. And then the odds-on favorite to win the Wooden Award this year is Luca Garza, who would add to the senior quotient. And we will see where he ends up getting drafted, because as we've seen, most of these players, it's kind of funny that most of these players still end up going pretty high in the draft, even if you have concerns.
Like Frank Kaminsky, like they've still gone, in that first quadrant, especially but yeah, Luca Garza also, he did come out last year as well. Came back, so it would be interesting to see, where he's projected. I just was reading actually that Iowa is going to he's the all-time leading scorer at Iowa now, and they're actually going to retire his number. And I guess that pissed off the former all-time leading scorer, because he was like, "Well, my number is people are still wearing my old number.
What have you done with me? What have you done for me lately?"
Yeah, it's kind of like, where are you today?
But yeah, nonetheless, yeah, Luca Garza's had a fantastic college career. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with him in the NBA draft. But yeah, we see that the guys who won the Wooden Award, who ended up going first pick in the NBA draft, turned out to be 2 absolute studs. Yeah. And I know that Cade Cunningham certainly and Evan Mobley, a couple Wooden Award finalists this year. Doubt that they end up winning the award. They did both win Player of the Year in the Big 12 and Pac-12 respectively, but yeah.
But the one thing I will say for the Pac-12 is, what do the coaches know? Because Chris Duarte was the AP Player of the Year, and we all know that the media is always very highly respected and never has wrong opinions on anything. So I'm going to say I'm recognizing the AP as the true champion this year, but
yeah, right.
Obviously, Evan Mobley, obviously.
Evan Mobley was,
yeah, which is great.
Though I will say, and you and I agree on this, Wooden Award finalists announced, Chris Duarte should have at least been a final.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see in the all.
I'll name a couple names. Chris Duarte over Quentin Grimes, Herb Jones. There, I said it.
And we'll see, and we'll probably rant more once the All-American teams start getting released. And these awards do go up. But yeah, we're heading into championship, conference championship week this week. So super exciting time for NCAA fans, basketball fans. This is the time of the year where you're gonna get that guy or person in your office. It's like, I don't know basketball. I'm just gonna pick randomly, and they're gonna do better than you, even though you study this stuff all the time. So March is just a wonderful, fun time of the year to connect with everybody and just gather around. It's like Christmas for basketball fans. Just gather around the television and watch all day. And I'm looking forward to I'm taking the work week off, and I will be watching as much as I possibly can, because that was my tradition going back to college of just Thursday and Friday, just planted at a television set.
It was a must.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're really excited for the NCAA tournament. Who are some of your guys' favorites? Would you rank anybody differently for the Wooden Award? Do you have any thoughts on who should have been a candidate during that year? Let us know in the comments, or you can email us at viselandpod@gmail.com. Yeah, JV.
Yeah.
Check us out.
Yes, let's not forget to follow us on Twitter. If you like me, I'm at Visenberg. Everywhere you can find social media. If you like that man, Michael Visenberg over there, you can find him on Twitter at NBA Draft Mikey V. If you like both of us, you want 2 hits at one time, at Viseland. Follow us on Twitter. And then, yeah, again, any comments, questions, concerns, topics you'd like to discuss, different, if you have a hot take that you feel like we missed, which is impossible, because again, media usually, right? But you can definitely, again, drop us an email at viselandpod@gmail.com. And, if you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, smash it, put the thumbs up in there. If you're listening to us on any of the podcast streaming platforms, definitely reviews are super, super helpful to kind of spread the word and just give us some love. We appreciate you guys so much for checking us out every week. And we look forward to these next few weeks here in March, because it is a fun basketball time, because we've got that NCAA action we just talked about. We got NBA playoffs starting to, shape and take form. So we will see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.
Shout to Pro Insight.
Shout out to Pro Insight for the hoodie as well. Our very good friends over at Perspective Insight. Definitely check them out. I will have a link in the description there. So definitely give them some love as well. Take care, everybody.